Yo, thanks for checking out the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm 12 Kyle. Check this out. On this podcast, we're going to talk about OutKast. Now, OutKast is widely recognized as one of the best and most influential hip-hop groups of all time. Their second and third albums, ATLiens and Aquemini, were certified dope. While you can't deny the greatness of either album, some fans often debate which album is better. On this week's podcast, the homie Matt B stops by, and we're going to debate, based on our criteria, which one is better. So sit back, relax, we'll drop the theme music, and we'll get the podcast jumping. Let's get it. Welcome back. As I mentioned in the intro, we got a special conversation. We're talking about OutKast's second and third albums, ATLiens versus Aquemini, and we're going to try to determine which one is better. And of course, I'm not doing this podcast alone. I got the homie Matt B up in the building. Matt, what's up, man?
Oh, man, you're about to lose this one today, Kyle. You are about to lose this one today.
That's what everybody says. What's good, man?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Just ready to talk about two of my all-time favorite hip-hop albums.
Great. That's what's up. So let's start right there, man. What are your first memories of hearing OutKast, the group, and what did you think, when the first time that you heard them?
Oh, shit. All right, we got to take it back to when I was 8 years old. Wait, no, I take that back. It was 9 years old. I was in the fourth grade, and it was... See, I'm about to show how young I am right here now, Kyle. Okay. So, it was 2003. The Way You Move and Hey Ya had come out as singles, right?
Wow.
And I just remember hearing, the complete different contrasts, and just, man, I got that album, the clean version for Christmas, because, my parents were tripping back then, but it's cool. And yeah, from there it was on. Roses was my shit. Prototype, Tomb of the Boom, I think is still underrated to this day. Mm-hmm. Killer Mike's features on Speaker Box were nasty. And then I remember my moment when I fell in love with them, because I loved that album, but I hadn't heard enough from them to be oh my God, Mm-hmm. And then I heard Stankonia. That was, once again, I'm showing my age. Us youngins, that's how we got into OutKast.
Okay, so you had to go back.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
I heard Stankonia, and I was blown away. You cannot shit on Bombs Over Baghdad. You just can't do it. There's no logical explanation as to why somebody be oh, that's too poppy. Nah, fam, that song is amazing. And then from there, this is when my love for hip hop really started to blow the fuck up. I was in the 9th grade. I was 14 years old. Mm-hmm. It was December of 2008. Remember it like it was yesterday.
Okay.
I got their first 3 albums for Christmas, and I had already listened to them on YouTube and whatnot, because that's when YouTube was starting to get really big. And, I remember watching the video for Players Ball, and I'm just man, people call Andre a weirdo. They need to go back to that first album. Because he, people think Andre's soft, people think he's this and that, and I'm just nah, listen to that first album. There was a song on there called Claimin' True where he talked about packing a shank in his sock for kindergarten. I'm just man, look. Look, and then I heard ATLiens, and that intro came on, bro. We're going to get to that. Let me not, let me, because I heard those first 3 albums all at the same time that year.
Gotcha.
And I got them all for Christmas, and from then it was a wrap. I don't think I listened to anything else for 3 weeks after that day.
Damn. That's what's up. That's what's up. Just to let you guys know, the listeners, Matt and I, we talk hip hop a lot. Now we're there is a difference in age here.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's a difference in age here, but Matt is a true blue hip hop fan. So I had to get him on the podcast because we talk hip hop all the time. My first memories of hearing OutKast, God, it had to be, I want to say I was in college. And that just shows you how old I am compared to Matt. I was in college at South Carolina State University, and I heard Players Ball. Man.
Okay.
It blew my mind because it was something, first and foremost, that music didn't sound, familiar at all to me or any other hip-hop head at that particular time. But the thing about them was that they were coming from the South, Atlanta in particular. And up until that point in hip-hop, or at least to my knowledge, most of the Southern rappers that I would hear, it was all bass or booty shake. You know what I'm saying? It was 2 Live Crew, that type of thing. It wasn't, with the exception of Ghetto Boys. I take that back. Ghetto Boys were more lyrical, but Ghetto Boys also
UGK.
UGK came out. Well, actually, UGK came out after OutKast. So Cast came out. OutKast came out in 93, 94. So
okay.
So I think I heard Players Ball like in 93. UGK hadn't been out. Obviously, the Ghetto Boys had been out, but the Ghetto Boys was more raw and more violent. But I never heard this kind of lyricism at any particular given time. So I was blown away, man. And like you said, I remember hearing it. The first time I heard Players Ball was at a party. I can't remember. It was some house party in college. I'm not going to tell you what happened at the house party, but just understand that I was having a good time at the house party and we were jamming. And this song comes on, and so I was like blown away, and so that was my first time hearing them. And then subsequently, the first album drops, Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music, and like you mentioned, Matt, the video for Players Ball. No, it Andre 3000 on the first album, Southern Playalistic, and Andre 3000, on Stankonia. They're two different Andres, but no. He wasn't soft by any stretch of the imagination.
He's still not soft.
No, he's not soft. He's different, but he's a guy obviously that is held in very high regard as far as hip hop is concerned.
And I want to say this to the listeners out there, like, there's a reason, people, why nobody has ever brought up Andre 3000's name in a diss track before. Just keep that shit in mind.
Oh, of course. Nah, you people aren't crazy.
Yeah, well, Nelly went at KRS-One, so.
Hey. But yeah, you're right. But it's well respected, and I was really impressed, obviously, with what they had to say and their look and their whole vibe. So those are my first memories of OutKast. And then, like I said, seeing the first video for Southern Playlist. The first video I saw was Players Ball, and I thought that this was something totally different than what I'd seen before, but I really couldn't quite put my finger on it. But I knew that they were different. Right. Which leads me to my next question: What do you think makes OutKast special as a group, and what makes Big Boy and Andre unique as MCs?
Before I get to that, I wanted to make one quick comment about the Southern Playalistic video that always made me die of laughing. Like, there's a that Southern Playalistic Cadillac music video. I don't know if you remember this, but there was like the dude that walks up to the house at the beginning of the video, and he's like, "Yo, man, where that cut up at?" That is hilarious.
Hey, cut up that's an Atlanta term, man.
Oh, I know what it means. I'm not silly. You know what I mean? Like, I just thought the way that they did that, I was just like, oh, okay, this video is about to be slick, and then you just see them all in the house party and whatnot. I love that shit, bro. I love that shit. But anyways, what's the question? I'm sorry, I got off track.
No, that's okay. What do you think makes them special as a group? And then more in particular, what do you think makes Big Boy and Andre unique as MCs?
What makes them special as a group is they did what no other Southern, group and or solo act was doing at the time. They single-handedly knew how to take their experiences in the hoods of Atlanta and turn it into something positive. Mm-hmm. Like, even though Andre at the time had dropped out of high school and was in a Cadillac selling weight, as we all know, they still had the balls to grab Goody Mob and make Get Up, Get Out, And if, like Kyle already said, there's a difference in age, but, like, if you got into them back then, you would know, like, they were there was just something about them where you knew, like, these guys were going to be special.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I want to add this in too, just for the listeners, because, Dungeon Family as a whole, like, they're, aside from maybe Witch Doctor, I've never been a big fan. Peace to Witch Doctor, though. I'm sure he's a cool guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because we're going to get into that anyway. Without Goody Mob, OutKast would not be where they are today, And the fact that they had them on those earlier projects, I feel like it influenced them to be a little bit more introspective, if you will, and a little bit more influential on the younger community.
Mm.
Because if you think at that time when Southern Playalistic came out, there was conscious stuff on it,
mm-hmm.
but when Soul Food came out, it was just like, whoa!
Mm.
Like, these guys are taking it. Goody Mob got banned from MTV for being quote-unquote racist. Bullshit. But,
right.
Yeah, like,
MTV was known for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It reminds me of BET banning Little Brother for being too intelligent.
Don't start me on that.
But that's more my era of remembrance.
Shout out to Little Brother.
Yeah, but I mean, like, they Dungeon Family as a whole, like, their music was so colorful and eclectic and, like, so funky and soulful, but at the same time gritty. It was just amazing. Like, you couldn't replicate it unless you went directly to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I feel like makes them special as a group, not just OutKast, but I had to add Dungeon Family as a whole into that. Big Boy and Andre, you said, what makes them special?
Mm-hmm.
What makes Big Boy special to me is, like, when Andre started, venturing off and doing different things, he was kind of the glue, at least around the Stankonia and Speakerbox and the Love Below days. He was kind of the glue that held Dungeon Family together.
Mm.
Like, like, every time Andre would be nervous on stage, you'd have Big Boy right behind him to back him up and speak when they won awards.
Mm-hmm.
And then on Andre's side, like, that's the dude that made me... I mean, Big Boy did, too. Big Boy... Listen, people. If y'all are going to sit here and tell me that Andre is just miles and miles ahead of Big Boy, like, y'all need to sit down. Like, y'all need to go outside. Because Big Boy can rap his ass off.
Indeed.
And there's a lot of people... And I'm not going to argue with them on this. I'm not sure if I agree completely, but there's a lot of people that think on that first album that they put out that Big Boy was actually rapping a little bit better than Andre. It wasn't until ATLiens where people were like, oh my God, Andre, woo, like... I feel like that's when the true separation started in terms of people picking who they like more started to take place. And then with Aquemini, it was just clear as day.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, man, in terms of what makes Andre special, because I kind of just went off on a tangent.
No, you good.
What makes Andre special to me, man, is to this day, that is the only dude I know in hip-hop that can wear a dress and not get shat on for it, and that says something to me. That fucking says something to me. He can wear a white wig and fucking put furry-ass pants on with knee pads, and people are like, man, that dude is great. Like, he made it cool to be different in hip-hop.
Mm-hmm.
And without Andre, you wouldn't have Drake. You wouldn't have 808s and Heartbreak by Kanye. The Love Below single-handedly started that movement. Andre and CeeLo are what made it cool for people to sing in hip-hop, you know, at least in my opinion. You know, the listeners can call me out and tell me if I'm wrong, and you know, I'm sure they will, because, you know, savages out here. But but I mean, yeah, man, like, I think that they're both, they should both be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as far as I'm concerned.
Wow, that's what's up. That's what's up, man. I feel you on that. You make some great points. I think one of the things that makes them special as a group, OutKast, and you touched on it, they've always been different.
Right.
And they've dared to be different, and they haven't wavered in being different, even though, like, if you look at the Players Ball video, for instance, that's probably their most quote-unquote hip-hop looking video.
Either that or Southern Playalistic.
Yeah, that and Southern Playalistic. Those are probably their two most hip-hop looking videos.
Get Up and Get Out wasn't too weird either.
No, it wasn't weird, but it was Atlanta, you know. And I think one of the things that always stood out and will always stand out is, you know, them being at the Source Awards, getting booed, and Andre saying the South got something to say. You know, they made it cool, and they weren't afraid to express themselves and represent where they were from. And they were screaming Atlanta long before anybody else did. And I think if you grew up in the South and you understood and liked Southern hip hop in particular, people of my era really rallied behind this group because they represented for us. You didn't have to necessarily be from Atlanta, but here it was, you had two guys from Atlanta, from the South. They looked like you, they kind of talked like you, or maybe they talked funny to you, but they were unapologetically Southern. And
unapologetically them.
Oh, no question. And dope. And they were going to tell you and remind you that they were dope. And while they were different in a sense, because at that particular time, it was not uncommon for Southern artists to try to get on to try to sound like they were from up north.
Yeah, for sure.
And that is one way to definitely alienate the people who back you up. You know, if you're from the South, represent the South. But nobody carried the flag, I think, the way that OutKast did at a time when it really wasn't cool. Because you gotta look at the landscape here. This album drops in, when I say this album, I mean Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music, drops in '94. At the time, Wu-Tang was out. I want to say Tribe was out. Biggie was out. Nas was out.
You had The Chronic.
Yeah, exactly. So all of these albums were out. So these are different regions. Like you said, you got the West Coast. You got the East, which, you know, hip-hop started in New York City. So, you know, it wasn't about necessarily a turf war in particular, but there was nobody coming out of the South that was Southern and claimed to be Southern and was going to stay Southern no matter what. And so that was one of the things that, you know, stood out to me, was that they were definitely going to rep the South. Also, like I said, they were definitely going to be unique, and they wanted to express that, and they weren't going to change for anything.
For sure.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I think most of their fans, you know, gravitated towards that. The thing that makes Big Boy special, I think, as an MC, is that Big Boy, he's got so many different styles and different flows. He can go fast. He can go slow.
He can do choppy. He can do smooth.
He can do whatever you want, however you want Big Boy to spit, he can do it. And I don't think that he gets the credit that he deserves as far as his lyricism, because I think he's a dope-ass lyricist.
He's in my top 10. Sue me. I don't give a fuck. He's in my top 10.
He ain't in my top 10, but but he's dope. And that's no knock on him. I think he's dope as hell. Andre 3000, again, lyrical wizard. He's somebody who I think when he writes and he pens his lyrics, I don't think Andre is writing for that particular day. He's writing ahead. He's writing to where you can put on an OutKast album. For those of you listening, when you finish this podcast, listen to any OutKast album. And if you pick any verse from Andre 3000, there's going to be a line or two in each verse that you listen to that you may not have heard. I mean, you may have heard all your life or for the last 10, 15 years. And then there's something different that you take from that particular lyric. That's what he does. He has the ability to do that. Yeah. Very few MCs can touch you to say, oh man, okay, he meant that. I thought he meant this. I've been listening to this song all these years and this is what he meant. Like you mentioned, putting the shank up in his socks when he started kindergarten. That was a very, it was a very slick line, but it did not hit me when I heard it. It hit me, months later after hearing it. But I think that's one of the things that makes Dre 3000 one of the best MCs. I mean, a lot of people have him ranked very high lyrically, and rightfully so. I mean, he's dope. I wish I wish we could get another OutKast album, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. But that's beside the point. So
I wanted to add something to that too. Like, the only album that I would have to disagree with you on in terms of hearing stuff that I can go back to and being like, wow, is probably Idlewild. We can't exclude that one.
It's been years since I've heard Idlewild. I probably won't go back to it. The little bit that I remember from Idlewild doesn't have me going back. I think that was something that was built around the movie that they starred in, which I thought they did a good job in. And to me, I kind of look at Idlewild like a throwaway album. Like, it was almost like, we've got one more album left on LaFace. Let's get this one done. Like, we can build this around the soundtrack, and boom, and here you go. It wasn't terrible. Yeah, I don't remember it being bad, but it wasn't Aquemini. You know what I mean? So,
shit, I wouldn't even say it's Speaker Box Love Below.
No. So
you could take any one of their albums from Southern Playalistic to Speaker Box and the Love Below, and depending on the crowd, you'll hear somebody say that any one of those five could be their favorite.
Exactly. And I don't think that you get that from most artists. You definitely don't get that from most hip-hop groups.
Like with Public Enemy, you tend to know what their best albums are.
Right. And you can debate one or two, but it's not like 3, 4, 5 albums.
Right, like you're not going to be like, like Love Movement is better than Midnight Marauders. If you do, I mean, God bless, but like that.
If you said that, I probably think you're crazy.
Yeah, like so, somebody needs to be drug tested type stuff.
Right. So let's talk some of these albums. Let's talk ATLiens. The album. What are some of your favorite tracks and why?
Woo! Here we go. This is where it gets good. All right, so I'm gonna start with the intro, bro.
Okay.
The You May Die intro. That is one of, and this is gonna sound crazy, but that is one of the prettiest intros to a hip hop record that I think I've ever heard. Like, the way it comes in, it's just so dark and spacey, and then you got, shout out to Joy, she came in there and she made that shit. I wish that song was longer. I mean, it was perfect, but part of me just wishes like it would have been 2 or 3 minutes instead of like a minute. You know what I mean? But I mean, it just sets it off. Like, you're about to get something way different than you got on that first record. And then like after that, I just had to talk about that intro because whenever I'm on like discussion boards and shit, I never see anybody talk about it. I would say Two Dope Boys, obviously. ATLiens, obviously. Wheels of Steel, obviously. Damn, I'm going down the entire list. Holy shit. I would say from 1 to 5, and then, 1 to 6, because Elevators. How the fuck can you leave out Elevators? Babylon, probably, that first verse from Andre is probably arguably my favorite he's ever written.
Okay.
Just talking about, like, how... he came into the world high off cocaine while he was in his mother's womb. Like that, his verses, as you can tell on that album, were starting to get coded. Whereas on the first one, while they were dope as hell. They weren't as like coded. They weren't as like oh, I have to decipher every little piece. It was like, there was moments of that, but when you get to ATLiens, it's like, you could tell, like, this dude is just on a different level, you know? And then, Kyle, you already know which one I'm going to mention. But first, I'm going to mention Mainstream. No, not Mainstream. I'm sorry. Millennium.
Okay.
Millennium, man. Listen here, bruh. Those two verses, like, and the beat is just so, like, spacey and soulful. Like, oh, man. Now, folks, you're about to hear a moment where Kyle is tripping completely. E.T. is probably one of my top 3 favorite songs on ATLiens.
Hey man, I you know what? If I ask someone for their favorites, I don't get mad at them for telling me what their favorites are. You're good.
Yeah, but when I brought, you know what? I'm gonna jump into it just a little bit. When I brought up Mamacita, and I said ATLiens doesn't have a Mamacita, he was like, nah, but it has an E.T. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, it does.
What you mean? Oh man!
But continue,
folks. When he said that, I almost had a heart attack. Like I was at a friend of mine's, and I was sitting by the pool. I almost threw my phone in the pool. I was like, man, I can't believe this shit, man. Now, if you say the next one is filler, I'm just gonna hang up. 13th Floor, Growing Old.
Oh no.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say, like, don't trip too hard, Kyle. But, yeah, 13th Floor Growing Old is, I feel like that song, the way you said how Chunky Fire you feel like kind of leads into Stankonia, I feel that 13th Floor Growing Old leads into Aquemini. Because the last track on the album is just a remix of Elevator, so really the real last track is 13th Floor Growing Old. That shit right there, when Big Rube comes in, he had a homophobic comment at the beginning of the song with the whole sodomites thing, but aside from that, that song is fucking, like, mind-blowing. Like, if you listen to Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar, this album and Aquemini, I feel like if you took those 2 albums out of history, Good Kid, Mad City, and I'll even go as far to say To Pimp a Butterfly, neither of them would exist. You know, I mean, if you just hear the sheer influence, like, everybody says Kendrick is a West Coast Nas, like, fuck that shit. Listen to Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe and tell me otherwise, and tell me that he's not a West Coast version of Dre. Like, I mean, just to me, on this album, there's no filler. You know, like, it's in the words of Freddie Gibbs, shout out to Freddie Gibbs, it's straight killer, no filler.
Yes,
like,
yes.
It's just. And even if you don't like E.T., Kyle, it's better than Mamacita. I know that much. I know that much.
Well, I asked for the favorite tracks, and you named the whole album, but it's all good.
You damn right. I think the only ones I left out were Over the Woods, which is, those are still dope as fuck. Yeah. Like, don't get me wrong. I left off Waylon, and the only reason I left off Waylon is because I feel like it's a little bit too short.
Yes. I said that I did a podcast on. I've actually done podcasts on both of these albums, and one of the slight criticisms, if you will, is that Waylon could have and should have been longer because it's so dope. But it came off almost like an interlude. But if it was longer, perfect. But you get no qualms. You get no argument from me.
Yeah, I mean, I would say my least favorite song is probably Decatur Psalm. I still love it, but, like, if I had to be blasphemous and pick a least favorite, that one would probably be it. That and Mainstream. I love both of those songs, but, like, you know, I'm not going to just hit you with the whole album and not pick least favorites when I basically just completely gushed over it.
No, that's totally understandable. I think, let me see, my favorites. I would definitely say Wheels of Steel, Two Dope Boys in a Cadillac, and if I had to pick another one, I'd say I'm just going to do 3. I'd probably say actually Mainstream. Big Boy's verse on Mainstream is one of my favorite verses on the entire album.
I'm a little surprised you didn't mention Jazzy Bell or Babylon, but it's cool.
Well, you know what? Jazzy Bell is dope as hell. But the
Oh man,
only
here comes
problem. No, hear me out. The only problem with Jazzy Bell, the remix is better. That's the only problem, and that's no fault of
I'm not even mad at you.
Yeah,
I'm not mad at you.
Man, let me tell you something.
They're both dope as fuck.
When that remix came out, man, I'll never forget, I was in Club 1. Shout out to Club 112 where the players dwell. Rest in peace. Man, that club was jumping, and when the remix came on, I mean, like, everybody in the club lost their mind. It's, I guess, for me, and I've said this on both podcasts, I think outside of the fact that OutKast is a dope ass group, there's a sense of love and enjoyment because for me, I kind of grew up with them, and then also living here in Atlanta. I'm not originally from Atlanta, but I've been living in Atlanta for 21 years now. So my moving to Atlanta coincided with, I want to say, ATLiens. Yeah, by the time ATLiens came out, that following summer, I'd moved to Atlanta. So that's all we heard. So, we were really, really heavily into their music and their influence. And I mean, just, it was just incredible. So, and then being here when Aquemini came out, that was something, a whole nother, I mean, and I talked about it on the podcast. So that kind of assists in the level of love and appreciation I have for both of these albums. But yeah, if I had to pick three, I'll go with those three.
Wait, one question before we get to Aquemini. Mm-hmm. What about Babylon?
I like Babylon. I like Babylon. Babylon. It's funny, man, because like sometimes you'll hear songs and they remind you of certain scenes, and this just shows you how dope. Babylon is not necessarily a club song per se, right? But right. I remember going into Club Kaya. Shout out to Club Kaya back in the day, here in Atlanta, and they put that on, and I mean, bruh, everybody knew every single word. I mean, men, women, everybody. And
that's crazy too, because Babylon wasn't even a hit.
Exactly. It wasn't a hit, but the DJ played it, and people lost their mind. People, like, when the beat dropped, people were like, oh, like, that's all you heard in the back. That's all you heard in the background. And so, but
I thought the hook on that. I don't know the name of the singer. Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you that, but that, man, I just love how dark it is.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you mentioned Decatur Psalm. Decatur Psalm reminds me of church. It has that church feel, and with the choir in the background. And a shout to Decatur as well. So then we move on to Aquemini. What are some of your favorite tracks on Aquemini, and why?
Oh man, here we go. This is going to be difficult too. While I don't like it as much as You May Die, Hold On, Be Strong is very, how do you pronounce it? Ethereal. Mm-hmm. I actually, fun fact for those that don't know, and Kyle, you may or may not know this, that was actually supposed to be a full song with Andre and Big Boy verses on it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was supposed to be a full song, but they ended up just making it an intro because I guess for whatever reason they may have thought it wouldn't fit as a full length, like 3 to 4 minute song or whatever. But yeah, that was dope. I'm not sure if it's one of my favorites. I just had to bring it up because I feel like You May Die and Hold On, Be Strong are like two of the best intros to a hip hop record ever.
Okay,
I would put them over the Genesis off Illmatic as far as I'm concerned. But
now you're pushing it. But I feel you.
Man, all they were doing on the Genesis was riding in a car talking about New York. Like that, like the real intro to that is New York State of Mind, but that's a different conversation.
That's my joint. But yeah.
Yeah, I love that song. But anyways, Return of the G was, I feel like, a defining moment in not just Andre but Big Boy's career as well. They put a lot of stuff out there in terms of you know, what people were saying with them about them after the second album. People were like, oh, Andre's wearing a turban. Oh, is he gay? Is he on drugs? Da 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 da. You know, like, and it's just like, nah, man, the dude's just different. Like, ain't nothing gay or, you know, being on drugs. Like, you know, like, people were talking about this dude like he was DMX or some shit. Like, right. You know, like, and I mean, he even said on ATLiens that he got sober after that first album. But anyways, yeah, I feel like the way that he addressed, for lack of a better term, and I know if Mike Seatown hears this, he's going to cringe, but the way that he addressed the haters, and I cringe just using that word, like, it was second to none, man. It was second to none. He did it exactly the way that it needed to be done. I love Rosa Parks. That's not one of my favorites off of it. Let's get to Skew It on the Barbie. Let's get to that. I just watched the live video that you mentioned in the podcast the other day. I think I had seen it back when I was younger, but I just couldn't remember, like, the exact details. And, like, I like how they had the studio version of the song in the video, but they still had the crowd in the back. I thought that was ill as fuck. And for a Southern hip-hop group to get somebody from Wu-Tang, like, that was unheard of. You know, that, because, you know, this was still a time when there was a lot of people saying that Southern rappers were slow, country, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there was a lot of people saying, like, that they're stupid and basically just completely disrespecting the South, and Raekwon was like, hell no, fuck that shit. I'm hopping on this song with them, and it's gonna be dope. And sure enough, like, deliver this through your audio, Ghetto Mafia, Subgro, Hydro. Like, man, yes, what? Yes. Like, like, man. And the classic Big Boy line. Oh, damn, what was it? You know, I need my other half of mic because that Southern Playalistic Cadillac music was a classic, right? Like, right.
You got to get the other half of mic.
ATLiens should have gotten 5 too, but you know what? That's neither here nor there. I still think to this day they gave Aquemini 5 because they lowballed them on the first 2. But anyways, yeah. Now this shit here, Aquemini, the title track. Bro, let me tell you something about that second Andre verse. Like, ATLiens is, I'm just going to spoil it now, ATLiens is my favorite OutKast album. I think it's overall their best work. In terms of technical lyricism, not even artistically, not in terms of the content, but in terms of technical lyricism, you know, my mom wore some bins, float the wing, count to 10, meet the twin, Andre Ben, welcome to the Lion's Den. Like, yes. What?
Yes.
Like, what? Like, bro, who are you? You have to be like some type of Martian to rap like that. Like, man, Jesus Christ, bro.
Yeah, that. I talked about it in detail on the podcast, but that album, it did so much and it meant so much. It was crazy because there was, and I mentioned on the podcast that there was some, not a lot, but some pushback from some fans because ATLiens was so different and quote unquote weirder than Southern Playalistic. And so for some people, they didn't know what to make of Big Boy and Andre at this particular time. And of course, you know, Elevators was a smash, and this album, you know, does very well. It sells well. I think Southern Playalistic went platinum, and I think ATLiens went double platinum, I think. And then Aquemini.
Aquemini went double platinum too.
Yeah, so it was like, you know, people really didn't know what to make of it, man. But like you said, this album was so key for them, not only financially, but where their foot was in the game. And I think, you know, lyrically, it set them apart from everybody else. It put OutKast basically in their own stratosphere, if you will.
Now, see, I felt that way about ATLiens, though.
Well, you know what?
We'll get to that.
I think there's something to that. I think Aquemini was, well, you know what? Like you said, we'll get to it. Let me just say my favorites. Man,
oh wait, I wasn't done with my favorites.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just going to mention, like, we can't leave out the 2 art of storytellings, but I'm going to give you an opinion that a lot of people disagree with me on, Kyle. You ready for this?
What's that?
The second one to me is better than the first.
I can see why people disagree. I disagree.
I mean, but that first Andre verse, the way he just paints the picture.
You said the second is better than the first?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I agree with that.
Yeah, like I love the first one. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But, and then we're not gonna sit here and leave out Liberation or Chonky Fire or Spodioti.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I will leave off Mamacita though, even though I think that song isn't as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. It is the weakest song on the album for sure. You know, so
True
Andre's verse on Mamacita was dope though. I don't care what anybody says.
True indeed. My favorites, obviously, and like I said, I touched on them on the other podcast, so I won't go into too much detail, but Return of the G, I think one of the things that I love about that song in particular is you know, Andre just really going in, because there was a lot of talk about what he was or wasn't. And, you know, I think instead of bypassing it, he hit it right on, you know, from the beginning. And so that stood out to me. Obviously, Skewed on the Barbie was special to me and one of my favorites because, you know, Raekwon was on it. And, you know, they didn't need Raekwon to validate them, but I think it was validation for a lot of people, particularly cats up north, that these cats could rhyme. And I remember what was cool was, and for all my my ATLiens who are listening, Wu-Tang had a Wu-Wear store on Peachtree Street here in the city, and they had a huge party at the store. And I never forget, like, it shut Peachtree Street down. And if you're familiar with where that store was, like, it's hard really to shut that part of Peachtree Street down because it's a main thoroughfare through the city. I mean, like, so it's the main strip going downtown per se. And so and I remember we were standing outside. We were trying to get inside to the party, but we couldn't get in. And lo and behold, because they had a party after Wu-Tang concert, and lo and behold, next thing we know, we see a couple of Cadillacs pull up, dudes hop out. It's like the whole Dungeon family, and they go inside and they go in there and they're partying and everything like that. So, and this was before the album dropped. So, you know, we knew that there was some type of relationship or friendship or kinship between OutKast and Wu-Tang. So to have Raekwon on that song, I thought was dope as hell. Aquemini, I agree totally with you. Andre's verse, and I talked about it on the other podcast. Andre's verse was incredible. It is. Are we talking
the first verse or second?
You know what? To be honest, both verses.
I feel you.
They are one of my. It's one of my favorite verses on this album. And then I think, let me see, my third favorite song probably would have to be. I'd probably go Liberation. But I love this.
Oh,
what's that?
I forgot something. I forgot 2 favorites: Synthesizer and Slump.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and West Savannah. God, that I named the whole album. excluding Mamacita and maybe Y'all Scared. Although Y'all Scared was dope, but it is one of my least favorites. Because it is one of my least favorites.
That was a saying back then. If you scared, say you scared. So that was like
I still hear old heads. I still hear old heads saying that now.
Oh yeah. That was a big thing to say back then. So yeah, man, I think those are some of my favorites, and I think we both agree the track or the tracks that we don't like. The track that I don't like on this album is Mamacita. I don't know how or why. I don't know how or why it got placed on this album. I don't think it's a good fit. They could have left it off. And the only song that I didn't particularly care for, it's okay. I don't hate it. On ATLiens is ET Extraterrestrial. Yeah, so that's the only
Kyle.
one. That's the only one.
Come on, Kyle. You can't
nah,
put
man. It's not. Now, I will say this: it's not a skip for me, but it's not something like I don't run to the CD player and say, okay, hey, I got to play this one. So
you wouldn't say that ET is as whack as Mamacita.
It's not as bad as Mamacita, but it's not that good to me. It's just okay.
Oh man,
I don't consider it to be a filler song, but it's not. If I'll put it like this: if I was the creative director or the A&R, neither song would have made either album.
Oh, you tripping?
No. Now that's just me. I mean, you could have put it on the album. I'm not putting either one of them on either album.
Can I talk about about ET for just a second? Why I love that song. So well, first of all, I got to reiterate, you're tripping. I'm I'm borderline speechless. But I mean, man, Andre's verse on that and the beat. That beat is amazing to me. And the hook, this, folks, this is what experimental rap, this is one of the albums at ATLiens and Aquemini too, shit. But that song, you would not have artists like LP, You would not have, Run the Jewels and, yeah, man, I mean, he said, I only contemplate the stable dirt when I skeet my drops, no concentrate and knock another out the box. Why? Because in a sense, see, we all be kind of fly. And then he had the line where he was like, maybe the mockingbird and nightingale they want to sing, keeping this thing alive to the tables what we bring. We like hailstorms and blizzards in the middle of the spring, bruh. The first time and Big Boy's verse on that was nice too. There was no drums to it. It was just a creepy ass spacey beat with them just fucking that shit up, But I mean, hey, for the folks out there, I need you guys. Do you put comments on your videos, Kyle?
People can comment. Yeah.
I need y'all to tell Kyle why he's tripping.
I promise you they won't.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, they will.
I promise
they will.
I promise you they won't. Because I said this on the podcast and nobody said anything.
I'm bringing it up now. Y'all need to back me up on this shit because that's ridiculous.
It's not a bad song. Like you said, there's no beat. That I could have done without. But yeah, man. I mean, other than that, the album I think is an incredible album. So yeah, I tell you what. This is a perfect time. We can take a quick commercial break. We'll hear from OutKast during the break. And on the other side, we're going to break it down. Both Matt and I will make a case for which album we think is best based on these particular categories. The categories
Kyle's going to lose, y'all. Kyle's going to lose.
We'll see. The categories are musical content, which is their lyricism and flow, production, and the longevity of the album, meaning how did the album age. So sit tight. We'll take a pause for the cause for a commercial break, and we'll be back in just a second.
As you get older, like you said, you branch out as like brothers moving into their own little crib. Mm-hmm. We've been living together forever, but we still hook up. We still go to mama's house. We still do all
the same things. Yeah, I mean, and it ain't on the tip of animosity at all. It's just, it's personal preference. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we got a mutual respect for one another, and just about like the touring thing. You know what I'm saying? It was a decision. You know what I'm saying? Made by Dre. He came to me like, hey man, really, I'm not feeling it. Why would you want to force somebody to do something that they don't want to do to make them hate it? I mean, before you end up hating it, man, go and take your breather. You want to take a breather? That's cool, man. I mean, I still feel it. I'm gonna get out here and I'm gonna do it. But that's, you like, man, ride out. And people misconstrue that and think well, they don't like each other or nothing. We ain't missed a date. I mean, actually, we stronger than ever. I mean, before there was any movies, before there was any music, anything, MTV, BET, or whoever else, you know what I'm saying? It was Twan and Dre at Tri-City High School when we met, and it's a certain brotherhood we got and a love for one another, and we understand one another, and that's what it is, man,
As you get older, like you said, you branch out as like brothers moving into their own little crib. You know, we've been living together forever, but we still hook up. We still go to mama house. We still do all
the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, and it ain't on the tip of animosity at all. It's just, you know, it's personal preference. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we got a mutual respect for one another, and like, I mean, just about like the touring thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was a decision. You know what I'm saying? Made by Dre. He came to me like, hey man, like really, you know, like I'm not feeling it. Like, why would you want to force somebody to do something that they don't want to do to make them hate it? I mean, before you end up hating it, man, go and take your breather. You want to take a breather, that's cool, man. I mean, I still feel it. I'm going to get out here and I'm going to do it. But that's, you know, you like, man, ride out. And people misconstrue that and think like, well, they don't like each other. And nothing. Like, we ain't missed a date. I mean, actually, we stronger than ever. I mean, before there was any movies, before there was any music, anything, MTV, BET, or whoever else, you know what I'm saying? It was Twan and Dre at Tri-City High School when we met, and it's a certain brotherhood we got and a love for one another, and we understand one another, and that's what it is, man, you know?
And just like that, we are back. Once again, it's your boy, 12 Kyle, the 12 Kyle Podcast, and I got my man Matt B in the building, and we're talking about ATLiens versus Aquemini, the second and third albums from OutKast, and we're going to try to put our heads together to figure out which one is better. As I mentioned before...
Just a heads up, people, we already know what our answers are going to be, I'm pretty sure, so, like...
Yeah. So, you know, and I mentioned before the break, we're basing it on these categories. Musical content, which includes the lyricism and the flow. Production. And then thirdly, the longevity. How did these albums age? So, we can flip a coin. All right, Matt, you're up first. All right, so musical content, which album's better, Aquemini or ATLiens, and why?
Honestly,
yeah, keep it real. Now you got one thing about being on this podcast, you got to keep it 100.
I'm gonna roll with ATLiens barely, but really to me it's a toss-up, and I wouldn't be mad with either side to that coin.
Okay.
I just feel like it, you know, with a lot of people saying, because they got flack for their first album by people too, you know, and you know those people are fucking crazy, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, and let me explain. Let me cut you off. Let me explain to you why they got some flack. Because, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, there was a segment of hip hop that expected Southern rap artists at that particular time in the early 90s to be, you know, booty shake. They wanted, you know, Luke. They wanted that type of music, Poison Clan, whomever. And here it was, you got these two guys from Atlanta that, to be honest, didn't even look or sound like anything that most people had heard or seen before. And they were lyrical and they were dope. And so, and here's the key thing, Matt. They weren't trying to be from New York. They weren't trying to be from up north. So therein lies the problem for some people. And to be honest, that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And OutKast are just being themselves. I mean, like, why would we get on? We're from Atlanta. Why would we get on and try to be like we're from Brooklyn? We're not. So, so that's why they caught some, you know, flack. But that flack, if you will, I just dismiss it because that's exactly what it was. But go ahead.
But yeah, to your point, like, I feel like that's why ATLiens, to me, they sounded pissed. Mm-hmm. Like, they were like, man, we didn't get a lot of respect for our first album like we should have. I mean, over time, obviously, they did because of the impact it had on the South. But at first, like, it didn't have the impact that the two albums after did. We can both agree to that.
Right.
And ATLiens, to me, is them sounding like they wanted to prove to everybody that they were real artists. It was darker than Aquemini to me. It was moodier. I feel like without ATLiens, there would be no Aquemini. You know what I mean? Like, so I really liked that about it. I liked how they dived more into storytelling. And I liked how it was incredible to me, man. Like, I could write a book on both of these albums, but the musical content to me on ATLiens is a tad bit better, just slightly though. Like, I mean, if people want to disagree and say Aquemini's musical content is better, I wouldn't be mad at them at all.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and for those of you listening, if you've been following this podcast, when we've done the Versus podcast, one of the things that I've often said is, like, it's kind of like splitting hairs.
Oh, yeah.
And that's literally what it is. As you can tell, because you've got two people who not only enjoy OutKast and love OutKast, but love these two albums as well. So to answer the question, the musical content, the lyricism and flow, I think Aquemini's better, but not by much. As you mentioned earlier,
it's close, man.
Yeah, it's
close.
extremely close. When I listen to, the verses from Andre on Aquemini, the song,
right?
That is just a small sample of what he was trying to show us that he was going to give, and I think that album lyrically woke a lot of people up as far as Andre 3000 was concerned. It didn't necessarily for fans like you and I, but lyrically, I think that really put him in, or started moving him into that next stratosphere. There's a segment of people who think Andre 3000 is like a top 5 MC, and I'm not going to argue with you because I don't know, what your criteria is for top 5. But if you ask those people when did they start taking notice, it was right then at that album, lyrically. I would
say more so, like, if you're a hip hop head, the beginning of that was ATLiens, but nationwide, like, for
no question,
hip hop heads, for like casual listeners, I would say you're right on Aquemini.
Well, and I think even the fans who, like myself, who've been down with OutKast since day one, knew and know that these guys were dope from day one. Like, so Southern Playalistic to me is just as easy a listen as ATLiens or Aquemini. I think those 3 albums, and I said it on the previous podcast, I think you can take those 3 albums from this particular group and stack them up against any other hip hop act as far as their first 3 albums, and make a case for them. And you can't do that for everybody. I
would put Stankonia in that conversation.
Well,
too,
see, there you go.
But
there you go. And some people will, and I you get an argument from me on that. So I think musical content and the lyricism and the flow. I think you make a good point about ATLiens. They were, in a lot of ways, very mad because they were slept on Southern Playalistic. You go back and listen to the album. That's an incredible album. And for them not to get the props and the accolades, and of course, like I said, the album went platinum, so it wasn't like they didn't get the sales. But for them to get the accolades or feel like they didn't get where they felt like they should have been, I think that was incredible. And so, you can hear it. You can hear the you can hear their anger, if you will, to some degree, or disappointment, if you will. But I'm going to give Aquemini the slightest edge on the musical content, lyricism, and flow. Now, when we talk production, which one are you taking? Production-wise, which one's better? ATLiens or Aquemini, and why?
This is the only one. Well, I would go with ATLiens again, dude.
Okay.
First of all, let me just say the production on Aquemini is obviously fucking incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be a fool and discount that. You know what I mean? Like, that would just be absurd. But I think the production on ATLiens, I just love how dark it is, man. Like, it's just so moody. It's just so, like, it's almost melancholy in spots. Like, if you listen to Jazzy Belle, like, that song is actually pretty depressing. Babylon is another one where, like, Big Boy on that song, everybody talks about Andre's verses. If you listen to Babylon, Big Boy sounded fucking pissed. Like, my lyrics ain't clean. Like, you know, like that. I was just like, go ahead, big boy, I see you. You know, like he's like, these aren't, like, to your point, these guys aren't just your ordinary Southern rappers. These are thought-provoking MCs. And to back that up, I like the more minimalistic, darker production of ATLiens a little bit more. But I can also admit that the production on Aquemini is a little bit more lush. But yeah, I'd take ATLiens.
Okay.
It's close. It's close, though. It is close. And I understand a lot of people, the argument that I see, because this is, as you know, this is a very famous debate. It's not just with us people. Like, there's, I mean, you know, the common thing is, like, people will take the lyrics over on ATLiens over the lyrics on Aquemini, but they'll take the production on Aquemini over. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, that's where I'm at with it. But once again, I'm not mad with either side, and I think that I think the production on Aquemini, even Aquemini has some dark spots. Like synthesizer sounds menacing as hell.
It does.
But I noticed that there was a lot more like lush and kind of like, you know, Aquemini is not as dark as ATLiens. Like, that's just the fact of the matter. You know what I mean? Like, sound-wise anyway. And y'all don't know me the way Kyle does, but my music taste is very depressing. Like, I like a lot of dark, eerie, melancholy music, and ATLiens just kind of fits that vibe for me a little bit more. So, like, that's why I would personally take ATLiens, but I'm not mad either way. It all depends on what your taste is.
Right, and I think you make a very good and valid point that it is it's dark, and I think looking back on it from what I can remember, to some of the casual fans, that was an issue, but.
Man, fuck those casual fans.
but for, you know, for heads like us, you know, we don't care one way or the other. I'll kind of piggyback on what you said, man. I think the production is better on Aquemini. That being said, if you said ATLiens, I'm not going to necessarily argue with you, because, like you said, it could be a preference, like you said, where you like darker music. But I think the thing that wins Aquemini over, at least for me, is that so much of what you hear sonically sets up for what next for OutKast, and they really push the envelope after this album when you think about what you heard on Stankonia and Speaker Box The Love Below.
I want to add to that too, by the way, to the point you just made, because that was a beautiful point. If you listen to Hootie Who, no, Deep on Southern Playalistic, they took that and added it onto the beginning of Two Dope Boys. Yep. If you listen to 13th Floor Growing Old, it leads perfectly into Aquemini. Chonky Fire leads perfectly into Stankonia. You know, Stankonia, they kind of split it, and like Speaker Box is Stankonia without the weirdness of Andre, and The Love Below is Stankonia with all the weirdness and not the normalness of Big Boy. Right. So it's like, yeah, I just wanted to make that point. Go ahead. That's
a good point. I think it's a very good blend of blending all of these albums together, and that goes back to what you said earlier about the 4 albums, their first 4 albums.
First 5, in my opinion, but yeah, you know.
Right. And so when you look at it, I think production-wise, it's just that album really set it up for, you know, and I think just looking back on it, man, the thing that always stood out to me is that they weren't afraid to be different. I mean, like, if you don't have Aquemini, then you'll never have a song like Bombs Over Baghdad. And when Bombs Over Baghdad dropped, people lost their minds, and one of the reasons being because you've never heard a hip-hop song that fast. I don't know what the BPMs were for that song, but it was crazy. And so, like, to see the video and for it to get major airplay and, you know, it be a hit record or what have you, I don't think that ever happens without, you know, the success and the what they tried to do sonically with Aquemini. But again, I don't knock anybody who may say, you know, that they like ATLiens better, but I think production wise, I definitely got to go with Aquemini.
Yeah, I mean, and I've told you, like, my favorite artist is Tone Deaf. Mm-hmm. And his music is very, very, very fast paced, and he was doing that like before OutKast did Bombs Over Baghdad. But the cool thing about Bombs Over Baghdad is that they made it onto the radio with it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no question.
You know,
no.
Now that's not to say that what they were doing was better than what Tone was doing. They just had fucking L.A. Reid backing them. You know what I mean? So that kind of made it easier for them to get something.
Not only that, but understand. That was hard to get on. To be honest, that was hard to get on black radio, because that song is really it's too fast for black radio. To be honest, and it's too fast for radio. Period. But you know,
white folks love Bombs Over Baghdad.
But yeah, I remember when that song came out, because it dropped and the song dropped like right along with video, and
right.
I'm thinking if you don't have the video to coincide with it, you might have a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Trying to get airplay for it. But I think, you know, going back to the point, I think it's while definitely, and you know, it's, like I said, it's kind of like splitting hairs, because if you don't have the success of ATLiens, then maybe you aren't trying to do some of the things that you are going to do sonically on Aquemini. I just think Aquemini, they just said, fuck it, we're going left. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're going left. Yeah. You think we're crazy, you think Andre's gay, you think all of these other things, you think we're on drugs. You know, we're going to dictate what it is that we're going to do, and you're going to follow. And that right there spoke to me volumes about where they were as a group, and it's been that way ever since. Well, I want to say it's been that way since day one, but you know, they weren't afraid to set trends, you know, whether it be fashion, whether it be, you know,
hell yeah,
anything. And what they were doing sonically was just so dope.
And if you think about it, they influenced Biggie.
Oh, no question.
I mean, look at Puff Daddy directed the video for Players Ball.
Yes. I mean, like, you could see the influence not only in themselves but other groups as well. I know Q-Tip talked about how, you know, they influenced Tribe and vice versa, and there's a mutual respect, I think, that went around, and a lot of that came after the success of, you know, ATLiens and the sonic sounds and the feel of Aquemini.
Yeah.
So now, if we talk about the longevity, how these albums have aged, which way are you going?
Shit, that's tough. That's really tough.
Mm-hmm.
I think Aquemini probably has a bigger fan base. Especially, you know, it was one of the only albums to get 5 mics initially when it came out. And and for y'all that don't know, there was a lot of albums that got re-rated from like 4 or 4.5 to 5.
That was corny as hell.
I mean, Ready to Die should have gotten a 5 to begin with, and it got a 4.5. So like stuff like that I get, but you know, Me Against the World did not need to get a 5. I like Tupac, but we're not going to get into that. But anyways, yeah, I mean, longevity, I want to say it's a tie, but I know that on this podcast you want me to be real and pick one anyway.
Right.
So, shit, man. Come back to me. I'm going to let you go first on this one.
You know what, man? Honestly, for me, it is a tie. And it's okay that it is a tie, because it is. I think both of these albums have aged incredibly well. When I listen to them, you know, they take me back. They take me back to certain places. I remember, you know, ATLiens. I remember riding on campus at South Carolina State University, bumping it. I mean, front to back, and everybody on the yard had that album. And then I remember, you know, Aquemini being here in Atlanta and just going to clubs and, you know, just seeing how much love that they gave, you know, that they got for the city and they had for the city. I mean, like, I'll put it like this, man. I remember the biggest station in the city is probably one of the biggest stations in the state. A station called V103. They at the time V103 they would play hip hop, but they wouldn't play hip hop like that because we had our own hip hop station at the time. It was Hot 97, and this was when Chris Lover, aka Ludacris, was on the radio. But I remember.
Oh yeah, that's right. He was a DJ before he rapped. I forgot about that.
So, long story short, Aquemini comes out. They play the entire album, the edited version, on the radio on V103. Like, that's how much love and how dope the album was.
Man, but I'm gonna tell you what. You know, when they play the edited version on the radio, you already know the edited version didn't have the skits, so that's kind of disrespectful to OutKast. But you know, anyways, go ahead.
I just thought it was still it was a great look, and it was, you know, V103, and not just that, but just radio in general showing love because, you know, Cass had really put on and really rep for the city, and you know, subsequently there were hip hop acts and many hip hop acts to come out of the city, but I say this without, you know, hesitation. There's not one act to ever come out of Atlanta that has repped Atlanta better than OutKast has. Never. And I'm talking from OutKast on down to today. You know, from Jeezy to T.I. to whomever else.
The only one that's come close to me since OutKast is T.I.
Yeah. And
I mean,
and to be honest, if you don't have if OutKast doesn't blow and do their thing, then maybe you don't have a T.I. Maybe he doesn't, you know, make it out of the South as far as, you know, his popularity.
And I mean, in terms of Ludacris, like, I mean, I'm not even going to throw him in that conversation because I just feel like he wasn't on that level artistically with OutKast or T.I.
No.
But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think both of these albums aged incredibly well. Just personally for me, when I listen to them, I listen to them together. Like, if I listen to Aquemini, I'll listen to ATLiens. If I listen to ATLiens, I'll listen to Aquemini. It's rare for me to listen to these albums and not listen to them back to back. That's just how connected I think that they are. And I said the same when I had shout out to my homegirl Janae when I had her on the podcast when we did the joint, the D'Angelo joints, Voodoo and Brown Sugar. And I say the same. I listen to them the same, and I think both of these albums have aged incredibly well. And I think one of the things that speaks to the lyricism and how dope this album is that each time that you hear both of these albums, you can pick something from it, you know, that you didn't necessarily hear the first 100 times that you heard the album. And
we've listened. We probably listened to these albums over 200 times.
Oh, no question. I probably more than that. So yeah, man, I think for me, longevity wise, I'd probably say it's a tie.
All right. Before I give you my answer to your point on listening to them back to back, I'm right in the same boat with you.
Mm-hmm.
So like another example I wanted to give, you talked about D'Angelo. I feel the same when I put on Only Built for Cuban Links and Liquid Swords.
Okay.
I feel the same way with Low End Theory and Midnight Marauders. Yep. I feel the same way with for me, I'll take it. I don't know if you're a Pink Floyd fan, Kyle.
Nice.
But
but go ahead.
But with like Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here, like you know, or with the Beatles, fucking Sgt. Pepper and Revolver, you know. There's just so many genres where like artists put out these two amazing albums and you got to listen to them back to back because it's just like, fuck, man, which one do I like better?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I already know which one I like better, and I already know which one you like better. So that kind of negates the point. But you see what I'm saying,
right?
Man, I'm still kind of stuck.
You can just say you can say it's a tie.
Yeah, but fuck ties, Kyle. Like, we don't do ties out here. The NFL doesn't do ties. Matt's not doing them either.
Okay.
But I'm gonna have to make an exception. It's a tie.
See, I told you. Yeah, they're incredible pieces of work, man.
to your point on them not sounding dated, if you go back to a lot of classic hip-hop albums, they might still be amazing, but to me, All Eyes on Me sounds a bit dated, right? Straight Outta Compton, while the content isn't dated, musically, it sounds dated.
Not to me, but go ahead.
Man, look. But
you know what? That's another story for another day. We'll be here all day.
Yeah. Mike Seatown broke that explanation down perfectly, probably better than I could. But anyways, because they did that Straight Outta Compton review. But I mean, there's a lot of albums that while we love them and while we cherish these projects, you go back to them and you're like, I don't know if it can hold up today. Like, I love 36 Chambers by Wu, but it doesn't sound as advanced as ATLiens or Aquemini. You know what I mean? And you could feel free to disagree with me on that, Kyle.
Yeah,
I'm sure
disagree.
a lot of... I mean, I'm just saying, like, in terms of experimenting with new sounds, I don't think RZA was doing what Organized Noise and OutKast was doing. But
well, I think they're two different styles and sounds, but I see where you're coming from.
yeah, like, I don't feel like RZA really got super experimental until the solo stuff started coming out. But anyways, yeah, like you said, we're going to be here all day if we start,
Right.
Drifting off. But my point is like, you can put on ATLiens or Aquemini and they sound like they came out last night.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, ain't nothing dated about those projects. Nothing is like too dusty, as the young kids say. Nothing is like, I could play both of these albums in front of my 17-year-old sister and she would be like, holy shit.
Right.
Right. Like, you could probably find, and no, I'm not saying my sister's a Lil Pump fan, but you could find, at least I hope not, but you could find a bunch of teenagers that listen to nothing but, and I fucks with Migos, so let's get that clear. I do like Migos. But, I mean, I do... Listen, Kyle, I'm not putting them in the same conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, please don't go to sleep. I know you've been rocking with us this long. Please, he's about to talk about the Migos. Please don't go to sleep. Go ahead, Matt.
The point I'm making is, like, you could play these albums for a fan of Migos or Big Sean or whatever the fuck. Fuck Big Sean, by the way. But anyways, so let me not disrespect him. He's a grown man, but fuck his music. You could play these two albums for any one of those dudes or girls out there that are, under the age of 18, and they'll listen to these and probably vibe with it. More so than they would with, let's say, an Illmatic. Just because it's probably a little bit closer to what's coming out today, and to be honest, it's still way ahead of everything that's coming out today. Like, there's nothing about these two albums that sounds dated. Even the terminology, you still hear, I mean, aside from the whole cut-up thing that we talked about earlier. I mean, even from Atlanta artists, you don't really hear that term much anymore, but...
Yeah, that's because they're young, man. That's old Atlanta. There's a difference between, and I may have to do a podcast on old Atlanta and new Atlanta. So, yeah, it's but you're right, though. It definitely feels like... these albums, are still up to date, still up to par, and you can still get something from them at the end of the day. And I think ultimately that's what's important. Matt and I, go ahead.
The kids may not vibe with Southern Playalistic that much just because it's not as advanced as these two, but I mean, who gives a fuck? It's still an amazing album.
It's an incredible album. Incredible album. Well, before we get out of here, Matt, man, any other things you want to say before we close out the podcast?
Kyle's wrong. ATLiens is... Listen, I'll say this. Even if you like Aquemini more, ATLiens doesn't really have any filler on it. Whereas Aquemini does have Mamacita. I will say that.
Okay. I'll say that, I won't call Mamacita a filler song. It's just a bad song. Just like I think E.T. is just a bad song. So I think both albums, have a bad song.
Oh man, here we go.
So, but and man, I gotta thank you for coming on, man. We have these hip hop debates all the time via social media. So I gotta definitely thank my man Matt for coming through, bro. I definitely appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no worries, folks. We probably have the same debate like 10 times a year.
Oh, no question.
No question. So like,
and I'm glad, even though I wasn't able to get you on the other podcast, glad we're able to do this, man.
Yeah, I need to get on Dead End Sports one day and correct Ken for talking shit about my Ravens, because he talks all these positive things about Cincinnati, and
he don't like the Ravens.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's okay. That's okay. We've won a Super Bowl more recently than the Steelers have, so.
No question. So, yeah, that's going to do it for us, man. As always, thank you for listening, downloading, and subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle Podcast. So, for my boy Matt B, I'm your boy 12 Kyle. We'll catch you guys next time. 5 Gs.